What about when, as children growing up, you're kind of taught to be afraid of the dark, or kids are always afraid of the dark, and then you grow up to be this adult that don't want to sleep with the lights off. Everyone has to have a night light, or everything that goes bump in the dark or outside is all this fear of darkness.
Yes.
Why did they create this fear into us to fear darkness when we know we shouldn't?
Okay, that's a really great question. This actually stems in the root to mysticism. It's There's a way that we used to be that we take the step and then it appears. We were like saying it is kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had mysticism or magic purveying everything that we did first.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this led to is that we didn't have a fear of the unknown. We actually created the unknown. The unknown is nothing. That's why it's not known.
Right.
So we had a way of taking the unknown and making it into something. So we were literally walking into the darkness or walking into the deep and then coming forward into what we had created called day. And so this had to be dismembered by all the objectives and all the agendas that we've been through thus far, because it is the governor in itself. Fear is the governor. It's fire. It's the necessity to be able to still be able to rein back in the being, you know what I mean? Control, add some pain, add some punishment, add some fear to kind of like keep control. Now, when those powers were being used, they were being used responsibly and conservatively to basically to mold even your child. It's like when you spank your child, you're putting a fire on him, you're putting a fear on him. So if you do too much of that, though, you can damage their pride too. So there's a certain amount of that. So what the society has been doing is they've been using for hundreds of years only that force. Mm-hmm. And so now we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid to walk in the dark. Mm-hmm. So how I say that you can begin this process, and this is a lot of us experiencing this. Mm-hmm. I've gone through these experiences in different ways. I find that it also connects to deep water too. I found that there was an extreme connection between the fear of the dark and the deep of the ocean. Mm-hmm. So when I would go out there and, I would have, I'm not going to die technically unless something swallows me. Mm. But I'm terrified. So I'm in the middle of the ocean, basically. Just go in the middle of the ocean. I have this gear on, right? Not scuba diving, but just there with, life vests and the rest of the stuff. And, you can see.
Yeah, yeah.
And I look down in the water and, man, just it's terror.
Darkness.
And I started realizing, because I had to get familiar with it, like, I need to slow down the process, figure out where is this coming from. And I figured out that it was because when I'm looking there, I cannot, one, see everything. And two, I'm in a space where anything could be in here. And I'm having trouble with that because I want so much to be comfortable with the definition of what is in here. And so I went into psychology and I found that this is an actual condition of a specific hemisphere of the brain. Mm-hmm. That hemisphere of the brain needs to feel like that it has identified everything around it. And that's why we never really use that, especially that side of the brain, for anything related to our spiritual progress. We had access to this other side of the brain that was used to, it just a voyager. Whatever happens out here, it's kind of like the same thing that you see them do, as I talk about on Red Bull all the time. They jump off the mountain. They don't really keep thinking, well, this could be my last day. I could die on these slopes. If I scuba dive, my tank could just pop off and a shark could just eat that and my leg. And, all of the extra, because we're now traveling with our minds into all of the things that could go wrong. Yeah. So we would be more of like, well, I can't really die. And surely my day is going to come. But if it's not today, then it's not today. Because when you're on that cusp of the subjective plane, you really do witness that when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And when it's not, it's not. I don't care what you think you did and what kind of accident it was. And you didn't jump off the cliff. And if it wasn't your time, somehow even it would get rewind. You would find yourself on the ground and you would like, well, shit, I jumped off the cliff though. I'm supposed to be dead. And
Right.
you get up and walk on from there. And they were always playing with this. And that's the thing. They were always bending that threshold to make sure they never became to the point where they didn't realize that that was how things really were. Now, another area where this energy also is when you do get into some really crazy trouble.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden you gather this godlike force and start powering through whatever that trouble is. That particular component was activated in us all the time. That's what kept us non-domesticated, if you may, and not a people that you can really conquer. Because that whole, well, I guess we're going to die today. And I already know I'm going to go on and my ancestors are already there because I already saw them. And this is the other thing, like if you look at the design of Kemet and you look at any kind of, when you go into these temples, the main thing you see, if you really understand geometry and what's happening, is you're seeing places where the ancestors are actually still alive.
Yeah.
And you're even seeing in a person's house, they have places that are configured where when you basically go in that room, you're in there with the ancestors for real. You're not in there with just a statue. I mean, the way the wall is recessed, the way the light is actually coming in, the certain herbs and elements that are placed in the room, where they're actually placed at, makes this like a real communication center, like your entertainment room, a communication center for you directly genuflecting with your ancestors. So when you're genuflecting with your ancestors all the time, you're not really thinking that there's an end to anything. So you're not like concerned about as much this idea that you can do something or be somewhere and someone can snatch life from you and that you would end up in a horrible place and being tortured and all these kind of things. What this is a product of is that we are for sure in a society. That's what I was saying. These horror games and these horror films and these atrocities that we hear from time to time that happen, this is what it's ultimately doing to our consciousness, is it's breaking down our level of resolve against, this force of the deep, the death, the darkness, etc., which were forces that we have to progressively, well, we don't have to do anything. We get to do it. We get to progressively begin to develop ways in which we can train ourselves to deprogram from that. And as I said before, one of them is, going out in that water.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to kill you out there. You can have a life vest on. You can even get a little knife.
Right.
Harpoon gun one day. I was like, okay, let's go down. I got the
Ready.
harpoon gun, but if you keep coming back, as with anything, like in Costa Rica, like as you know, I'm in the jungle. Like stuff is out here for real, for real. Like even for me, there's two properties here because I have my office or whatever in one area, the studio, and then the main house in another area. So I got to walk to the main house every night. So there's no telling what you may see just in the short journey from here to the house. So when I first got here, it was funny because there was this spider. And when I first got to Costa Rica, there was a spider running across the floor. And I was staying with some folks too, just trying to learn more about the country. And I saw this spider and I was like, man, it's kind of like that Martin episode where you feel like this thing is somehow going to jump off the floor, go right at the neck, and you just going to be over
Right.
like, and this is not even realistic, but, so I'm acting like that, like, oh, shit. And then this old lady, Tico lady, she just smashed the thing and it was like, okay, let me understand here. You're 6'2".
Right.
You know what I mean? And this is getting to you. Like, what do you expect to happen to you here? So we find that a lot of these fears, like they actually have no actual pretense beside what's going on in our mind. Like we live to fight another day. It's like, think of your scariest night. You know what I mean? I've been in houses. That's when I was in Detroit. They got these old houses and spirits are really there. And it's like one night in one of these houses, it's like, dude, they even have rooms in the house nobody's been to. It's like nowadays we've been to all the rooms in the house. They used to have houses where the room is just nobody's ever been in there ever again for the last 10 years. And it's like you be in one of these houses and it's like a nightmare, especially after a couple Freddy Krueger movies, which we weren't supposed to be watching anyway.
Right.
And now it develops this huge thing. But the morning comes, nothing happened. but all of the energy was completely depleted on something that was completely coming from the mind. So that's where we know it also resides. And we also see others that don't have that issue. They don't seem to exhibit these certain levels of fear.
Yeah.
And then we also see how that opens up the threshold in their life for them getting to be able to explore and go more places.
So to add to that, would you say that the darkness is a connection with Black melanated beings? You had to take a sip on that one, I guess.
Yeah, because see, the darkness is deep. And I know that we want to relate blackness to darkness and we want to relate that to melanin, but actually it's more related directly to the netherworld.
Okay.
And like what happens when, so there's daytime and there's nighttime, right? And when nighttime starts happening, there's even like a different shift that takes place inside of your body where two different forces, you can say the being of the night changes place with the being of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So even when you actually are getting stuck in the transition, it's kind of because you're coming back like after shift change.
Mm-hmm.
And so the energy, which is literally being run by the sun and the moon, the sun predominantly, and its cycle moving through and through the pantheon, it's like the body, and when it shifts energy, it actually allows you to be able to basically make those transitions on proper time. However, when you enter into the netherworld region of the consciousness, which is the deep, where all things are residing, it is you kind of need to be built a certain way to deal with that, because it's like the excrement, it's like the congealment. Like what happens is, which is the foundation and the fertilizer for everything else, right? So how this works basically is that kind of what we discard, carbon dioxide and feces, is the fuel
Mm-hmm.
for many things in this cycle that we're in.
Okay.
But if you understand feces, you understand why you can't eat it. You know what I mean? Because it's like you've already drained all the energy out of something. You can
Mm-hmm.
eat this piece of celery, it's nice and green when it starts.
Mm-hmm.
Then after it comes out on the other side, it's brown,
Mm-hmm.
which also is a certain color that is very telltale of what are we talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
It's got nitrogen in it, so it actually has a combustible power.
Mm-hmm.
But for a light body, which is this body, it loves to eat light. It loves to eat all of these green things, and it loves to eat even plasma and blood. It feeds on that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other force, it feeds on our byproduct. Okay, and that's a whole necessary part of this whole process. So if you had a time to have a picnic with the beings that eat the byproduct,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be kind of awkward if you're not familiar with dealing in that space. And that's what the netherworld really is.
Got
It's
it.
like a space of beings that are primal in respect to how they function, and they're more denser, so they're slower. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this density gives the ability for things to grow,
Mm-hmm.
as we talked about before, because in high frequency, nothing can really grow. It's like the oscillations moving too fast, and it just kind of shreds apart things that we're even calling reality, thoughts, all that can't move even in high frequencies. So that's what's so interesting about this experience, and why, as I said before, it's just really about making sure that things are in their proper place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they're in their place, that's why I say the devil's beneath my feet. This was, got to understand what's being said. It's just basically saying that the foundational forces, because we started learning that this devil character actually is a little bit instrumental in the creation of the entire thing. And it's almost just instrumental as the opposing force, the God.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when we get into a certain level of maturity where we're not always trying to use derogatory statements to describe things.
Yeah.
Like right now, somebody even, let's use the term, somebody say a nigga, that is a derogatory statement for anybody.
Yeah.
So if you start calling other beings that because you feel like that their position is lower, that is the first way to start an argument or possibly an answer.
Right.
So
Right.
what happens with the netherworld, as I said again, is that they have this horrific description of things, and that's evil distortion. You can't put that in the realm of what the netherworld is. The netherworld is like really gigantic squid, Yamaya, like the old ancestor and ancient beings, mer people. This is what you're talking about, deep Meru. You know, the ocean, even Saturn's realm is in the ocean, the crystal city, the emerald cities. All of that is all ancient and archaic. Like, that's why nobody is allowed in there. It's not because they don't want to go there. It's because they're not allowed there. You can't enter those domains, just like they show you on the movies. You know, the one in Little Mermaid. They tell you, hey, you can't come up in here. There's a real boundary here, and that boundary is set by the shoreline.
Yeah.
So this is also, it's not even just, you know, like men there fighting about position. No, these are vast intellects, macrobes. It's just like this. If you go into the ocean, you may run across a life form that you've never seen before, large, huge, with a vast intellect. And so too, if you go into space, you will run across the same thing. That's why there is life out there, as you calling it life, but it moves like a gas. Because when you start going higher, once you break sea level is the zero, like the balance, like even. Sea level right where it starts. It starts there specifically for a specific reason. That's why when you go up higher, it's pressure. You go down lower, it's pressure. On the sea level, it's no pressure. So then when this pressure starts getting higher, all the elements from up there, you can't really see them. They're actually gaseous. They're for sure there. You know, you tone it in the third eye and you start taking a look when a storm or a weather system come through, and you will see the whole forest move through, and you may be sitting back there terrified. And look, and the storm will even pass and do nothing to you. And you'll be like, damn, I was just terrified for nothing. And it's like, when you really get out of that zone and start realizing what you're really dealing with, it actually starts to open your eyes to more and more of what's going on. And so this is why conquering the fears have a lot to do with becoming aware of certain things, almost as if the fears are only there as like time released locks to get you aware, like how your parents used to do. Whatever they don't want you touching, you open that cabinet, it'll kill you. There's an axe that's gonna fall. Whatever to say to get you not to go in there. But then when it's time, you start braving up to open up that cabinet. You see what I mean? And then you realize that's where they've been keeping all the alcohol or something. So what it is there is this format that we can always hearken to in life, which is how parenting works, how our tribe works. That when we want to answer certain questions, why do I have these fears? You know, especially since I don't really want to have them. So they must be there for an actual reason. What is that? Because those are locks there. And now when you're ready to release those locks, you're going to actually start, you know, you ask the question, then you start getting more and more of the awareness. Because one of the things about dealing with that realm, the underworld, is it's a big respect thing. Like, it's better off not even to know that they're even there and that they even exist if you do not have respect, because they don't have that same threshold of letting you say and do anything to them without actually suffering the repercussions. See, that's what actually happened to us, even as a race of people, if you may, that when we started making oaths and pacts and dealing with the spirits inside of the water, when we didn't keep some of those oaths and pacts and those promises, it created a debt for us. And I talked a little bit about that and about how there's a spiritual debt that we're still dealing with because of this consistent, basically conscripting other life forms to do certain things for us and then cheating them by not paying them what it is that we promised them. And so, you know, this is rife in the world. It still happens today. And I just want to speak at why there is even a netherworld and why there are things that are down there that are like, they're old. There's old stuff. It's decaying. But yet it lives because we're in an infinite existence. It's just living on that frequency. And I always say many of those things serve to actually let us know where we don't want to be. They're perfectly fine with who they are and what they're doing. You know, they're not into this. Elements are not into this. I wish I could be. That's our thing.
Right, right.
They're not trying to be something different than, you know, Lord of Netherworld 2. You see what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just like in passing it. And that's why we deal with most of the Netherworld when we're asleep. Our dream body is equipped to deal with the Netherworld and to navigate it every night and get us back to the real world, most of the time unscathed.
Right.
Sometimes, you
Right.
know, a crazy situation could jump off in a dream, and then you could be up there, wake up in the morning like, I'm so glad that I'm here. And once again, this just chimes into what we were saying earlier. Getting in control of the dreams is not really just getting in control of the dreams, it's actually getting in control of the afterlife. And when you start learning how to control your dream, when you quote unquote die, you just go into a dream that you can control and you never have to report back here. There's never the time shift where you got to come back into the body.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and you know, and it's a very real thing. It's like it's something that can be accomplished now. It's not one of those things where we got to wait until we're dead to actually experience.